Good morning, everyone. This is Ajay. Welcome to this EduBrite webinar series. Today's topic is making the most of your in-person trainings, or ILT, the more commonly used term to describe these. Uh, Today's presenter are myself, Ajay Upadhyay. I'm the moderator, and the main presenter of today's session will be Brian Rush. Just a quick housekeeping information. Please use the questions box from the GoToWebinar control panel to post any question during the webinar anytime. And we will take your questions during the webinar or towards the end of the webinar. And you can also, if you want to post your questions after the webinar, feel free to go to our users community. The URL is university.edubrite.com, and there you can post any question you want to share with us or with the community. So with this, Brian, it's all yours. You can take control.
Thank you, AJ. We're going to first talk about audience leveling and prerequisites for classes, and then we're going to follow that up with pre-work and post-work. We'll also talk about how we measure success of a class and how we create meaningful evaluations. AJ will be demonstrating how to schedule sessions, as well as book instructors, venues, and resources, and then using attendance tracking and wait lists, and using assignments and forums and subgroups, which we'll be talking about in the upcoming slides, and then multi-day classes. So with ILT, there's really no hard and fast rules for determining when to use ILT, and it may actually be more of an art than a science. There are a number of factors that go into choosing a modality. Yet despite the higher cost of in-class training and the corresponding popularity of e-learning, there will always be times where old-fashioned instructor-led training is required. Some cases may be immediately obvious, such as having to have welders in place, or the environment or equipment dependencies. Perhaps it's fire safety training, or it's something that is in the field or in a shop like you're seeing here. Some cases may be obvious, but in others, there are subtle distinctions that need to be made in determining the modality of the training. For example, in technical training, a virtual instructor-led training may be acceptable if all learners have the required software and hardware and the instructor has the ability to view the learner's screens. But in other cases, there may be no substitute for having a computer lab set up with computers loaded with specific environments and a live instructor looking over one shoulder and advising as necessary. When considering modalities, it's also important to maximize the training budget. As with airfare and hotels, meals, and the opportunity cost of learners' time away from their job, ILT can become very expensive very quickly. We'll talk about the criteria behind these decisions in this webinar. You'll see here the group activities are this breakout session where there's discussion, collaboration, problem solving, and role playing. Not to say that those couldn't be done in virtual instructor-led training as well. There's still something to be said for the human interaction and being able to collaborate in person. One of the things that's very important to a successful class is learner leveling. Learner leveling is about making sure all class attendees are on the same page, or at least on the same level of knowledge and experience. It's not a good use of time for the learner who may be in over his or her head, and likewise, in fairness to the instructor and students with the prerequisite knowledge, if someone is not advanced enough, the instructor's time may be spent disproportionately on keeping him or her caught up with the rest of the class. Prerequisites, in the form of course order enforcement, can be used to filter out learners deemed not yet ready for the class, particularly in academic instances, but may not account for knowledge or skills gained elsewhere for those in the workforce. Life experiences outside the current workplace cannot often be accounted for. In lieu of, or to make exceptions for prerequisites, assignments can be used to judge the candidate's suitability for the class. For example, for a leadership class, a potential enrollee may have to write an essay and submit it to the instructor for approval. Whereas for technical leveling, a coding exercise can be used to screen enrollees to help ensure equalization of experience and knowledge amongst the learners. Likewise, an assessment can be used to help determine whether or not someone is qualified to enroll. This pretest will not only assist with learner leveling, but for those that are enrolled, can also serve as the baseline for determining learning effectiveness of the class along with the post-test. And then a less formal but equally useful method is to use surveys to allow the potential employees to rate themselves on their levels of experience with the topics and ask them why they feel qualified to take the class. Learning involves something from an instructional designer's perspective called Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy involves a number of learning methods and basic concepts. Remember is the foundation, and that includes the recognition of recall of facts and basic concepts. Understand involves being able to explain ideas or concepts. And then apply involves using acquired knowledge in new situations. Analyze involves drawing connections among ideas. Evaluate involves justifying a stand or decision. And then create involves producing new or original work. So those are the levels of learning. Then we also have the learning pyramid, or the cone of learning. And that comes from research on teaching methods by national training laboratories. Each of these methodologies has a corresponding retention percentage. While there's question as to their validity, and there are recent articles on debunking it, its message still has value in this discussion. ILT falls in as a blend of these. Lecture could be considered ILT-centric, but there's no real value add in having a live instructor talk compared to talking heads in an e-learning video. And with a 5% retention, you can see why a class needs to be more than a monologue. The top one there, teachers teaching others. To teach is to learn twice, is a quote from Joseph Joubert. And that's the ultimate form of learning, because you're having to not necessarily regurgitate the training, but reiterate it in your own terms and carving those neural pathways for the learners, but also for yourself. As you can see in the green, the participatory ones are the top three, and those are the ones where there's the most learning retention. And the tan ones are more passive. With instructor-led training, the Bloom's taxonomy, evaluate and analyze, correspond well to practicing by doing, discussion group, and demonstration. Those are all the instructor-led training correlations that we're showing here. So don't think of an ILT class in isolation in and of itself. A hybrid approach allows you to utilize the best method for each stage of the learning and maximizes in-class time for essential activities. With a flipped classroom approach, learners are doing the lower levels of cognitive work, remember and understand from our Bloom's taxonomy, outside of class, and focusing more on the higher forms of cognitive work in the classroom, such as apply, analyze, and evaluate. So here's an example how a blended learning approach could work. With pre-work, we could survey the enrollees online for experience within the learning objectives to get a baseline on the class, or use an online test prior to registration to determine learners' level of proficiency. Likewise, you can assign a pre-read or a video to watch prior to class. A VILT, or virtual instructor-led training, also known as a synchronous online class, is something that can be used prior to the actual physical meeting. For example, you could have everyone introduce themselves and state their reason for taking the class. Use the VILT for anything that requires group participation, but not necessarily a physical presence. For example, utilize the time for audience leveling by gauging learners' experience level and prescribing any additional pre-work as necessary, or adjusting the deck of slides accordingly if everybody has a certain amount of experience in a certain topic. Have a breakout session with teams and then use the forum for ongoing discussion. The ILT is the actual class itself. If these previous training methods have provided pre-work and it's not necessarily obvious that we have to reintroduce ourselves, etc., the instructor can confirm the experience baseline and use a different icebreaker for the class. So post-work is something that happens obviously after the class, but this one deserves its own slide, so we're going to talk to this one here on this next slide. Once a class is over, attendees are bound to forget a vast amount in a very short amount of time. A man named Hermann Ebbinghaus was a German psychologist who pioneered the experimental study of memory retention in the late 1800s, conducting his research with nonsensical monosyllabic letter combinations. He memorized them, then recorded how much he was able to remember over prescribed durations. The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve compares memory retention over time and indicates quite dramatically with its exponential curve how rapidly learning retention diminishes. The sharpest decline occurs in the first 20 minutes, and the decay is significant through the first hour. The curve begins to level off after about 1 day. Repeated recall of information improves retention to about 80%. A refresher training can be a VILT to reinforce the key takeaways. Or likewise, you could follow up with an e-learning course or micro-learning to fortify the key takeaways. It's helpful to nudge the learners with notifications periodically containing useful nuggets from the class. You can use assignments to get learners to validate having used the learning in practice within the workplace. One technique is for learners to have a post-course discussion, such as a conversation with their manager about how they intend to use the newly acquired skills. With teaching being the best way to learn, a learner could share the key takeaways with colleagues in a brown bag meeting or a webinar. So that knowledge share is duly beneficial for both the learners and the teacher. Measuring success. Something called the Kirkpatrick model. It's been around since the 1950s. It's been revamped recently to include terms that are more friendly to the current times and culture. The first one is called reaction. That's where we essentially measure the learner's satisfaction with the class content and delivery and how it pertains to their job. Level 2 is learning and measures how well the class imparted the intended knowledge or skill. Level 3 measures whether the learner's training translated to the intended behavior change on the job. And results or impact, level 4, are where outcomes of organizational goals are tied to training events. These exceed the scope of this webinar, but we'll discuss the others in more detail in the following slides. Reaction measurement is usually in the form of smile sheets or class evaluations, typically done with Likert scale ratings. With Likert scale ratings, make sure that the scale key is clear to learners so they know the high and the low value and how they correspond. A 5-point scale is often enough, as any more can blur the lines between the subjective terms, and reporting results are usually combined after 7 or more anyway. Consider having an A or not applicable in case something wasn't covered, for example. While Likert questions can provide numerical values for aggregate analysis, open-ended questions provide valuable insight with opinions and suggestions for the betterment of future class sessions. If paper is necessary, scannable bubble sheets may be fine for Likert questions, but open-ended answers in digital form are more valuable than handwritten notes. If polling of the class for things like chair comfort, meals, and room temperature is desired, keep that poll separate from the class evaluation so as not to skew the meaningful results of the class effectiveness. Learning, or level 2, is often measured with exams or tests and maps to the knowledge and comprehend or remember and understand aspects of the Bloom's taxonomy. For level 2 to be effective, it is essential that questions are tailored to the learning objectives and they were covered in the class. Writing quality questions and using the appropriate question types is equally important. We have a recorded webinar on creating effective assessments available on EduBrite University, and you can find out more information there. If there was a pretest prior to the class, this post-test and the delta between the two provides valuable insight into the learning effectiveness of the class. Level 3, behavior is determined after the class has ended and is when the learner has synthesized the learning and used the acquired knowledge or skill in the workplace. Depending on the hardness of the objectives, this could be a demonstration of technical proficiency or an evaluation of a softer skill, such as public speaking. Level 3 is usually used for ROI, return on investment justification, which training budgets often depend upon. But depending on factors, including the duration since the class has ended, as well as any possible confounding variables, there may be inherent bias or unscientific methodology in the data gathering and analysis of post-class behavior changes. So one has to be careful with that and make sure there's a direct correlation. AJ, I believe it's time for me to hand off to you at the demonstration at this point.
All right, Bran, thanks. Thanks for covering the deck. And now I'm going to share my screen for a demo of the ILT functionality using EduBrite LMS. And we'll try to cover most of the points that Brian discussed in the presentation. All right. So we'll go step by step and show you how you can set up a ILT based delivery of your trainings in EduBrite. Of course, like if you are using another LMS or you're planning to evaluate multiple LMS, you can see similar features in other systems also. The idea is to basically just address some of the points that we discussed about the characteristics of the ILT in this demonstration. So to set up a ILT course in EduBrite LMS, you have to start by building a course. Whether or not you have any self-paced component in your ILT, it does not matter. You still have to start by building a course, and that course can be as simple as just a wrapper. So for example, you can just say I want to create a ILT placeholder course, and then just save it, and that's as simple as that, and just publish. So everything starts about ILT once you have published the course. So once you publish the course, you need to schedule a course session, which is like a container for individual ILT sessions that are called event in EduBrite. So there are three entities: course, course session, and event in EduBrite. So once you create the course, you can create a course session, and the course session basically allows you to set the duration as long as this particular course can be enrolled from the learner's perspective. So like you can select a group in which you want to set up a course session. You can set the start and end dates, and these start and end date need not govern your individual class duration for the ILT sessions, because those will be called event, which we'll set up later. So this particular thing is a duration for the overall wrapper course session. And once you created the course session, by default, the course session gets created with some default settings unless you have used some template during the course session creation. You'll have to basically activate some of the ILT specific features, such as event, assignment, attendance tracking, auto assign assignments. So depending on your need, you can activate some of these features, and just to make it more convenient for ILT delivery. So once you do that, you will see these additional tabs on the particular course session. So now the process for subsequent steps are that in a ILT, you will decide who is going to basically conduct the individual classes. If let's say it's an onboarding related ILT training, you'll have to assign some instructor for this particular course who will take some of these individual sessions. And these individual sessions are called event in EduBrite. So you'll go to the events tab and start building the event for specific dates. Now, EduBrite supports both offline ILT as well as VILT with integration support from Zoom, GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting, GoToTraining, WebEx, etc. So most of the commonly used conferencing systems are integrated with EduBrite. So you can create any kind of session, whether it's ILT or VILT. The process is same, except that in case of VILT, you need to first enable the integration within your microsite, which is your online account with EduBrite. So there, if you go to the site settings and go to the online event integration tab, here you will see all these integration options, and you can activate these particular integrations that you want. And then once you have enabled these integration, then each host who needs to conduct these ILT class needs to needs to set their own specific host ID, which is there with their conferencing provider. So in my case, I'm just showing the Zoom meeting host ID here. If it is a WebEx integration, then the corresponding properties will need to be filled in at the user profile level. So that's the kind of the overall setup process. I already have created one course session which is for the sales onboarding. So I'm going to walk you through with this existing setup course in the interest of time. We will start with how the course itself was set up. We are taking an example of an ILT scenario where it is not just pure ILT, but it's more of a blended delivery so that we can demonstrate all the features necessary for supporting ILT. So in a blended delivery, it's a combination of some self-paced component, some instructor-led in-person components, as well as there could be some collaborative activities among the learners within the class or in an online manner. So that's the kind of use case we are going to show here. So this is my self-paced course, which has 4 modules here: introduction, videos, classroom and assignment, and exam. So in the introduction, we have just created a wrapper lesson which describes this particular course. And then next is a pre-test. So the pre-test essentially, as Brian discussed in the presentation, the idea of a pre-test is to measure the learner's current level of understanding of the particular subject about which this course is. So you can set up a quiz, any kind of quiz, and then allow people to go through this quiz before the class. So that's the idea. Make it mandatory, and generally, if it is a pre-test, you don't want to have this outcome of this test affect the overall grade of the student. So from the properties, you can make this particular test non-graded. So what it really means is learners have to basically take this, but their outcome will not affect the overall grade in the particular course. Now, the next I have kept a video lesson just as a placeholder, but you can have any number of self-paced content packaged inside the training in this course. Next, we have a module, but there is nothing inside it because the idea of this particular module is that users will take some physical class with instructor, either on an online media or in the classroom. And after the class, they need to submit some assignments, which the instructors can grade. And then they can also record their attendance. And after that, they need to take a post test. So post test is also similar to the pre-test. In fact, I'm using the same set of questions by importing the same questions in another test. So the questions are not recreated. You can see the questions are same. They are imported from pre-test. So the idea is that we can see how the learners have responded to the same set of questions before the training and after the training. And then you can compare their performance and analyze the effectiveness of your training. So that's the idea about setting up the course. Now for the course session, have this is the setup of the course session. So you can see there are a number of tabs activated here: assignment, event, calendar, forum, resources, etc. So for the resources, the idea is that besides some self-paced learning content, which actually gets tracked and you can grade users based on this self-paced learning content, you can also have some supporting content, which are like resources. So those resources you can organize for the course, which will be available to the learners whenever they want to take any kind of a classroom session or VILT session. Before that, they can access these resources. So just an example of the kind of resources that you can upload. So you can have files, you can have links, videos, all kinds of stuff here. And these resources can be downloadable depending on how you set up. An example could be that you might want to have the session handout as resources along with your course content. Now, coming back to the course session itself. So on the members tab, we have the learners enrolled here. The enrollment process is pretty generic, how regardless of whether it's ILT or VLT or self-paced or blended, learners have to enroll either through self-enrollment or system-based automatic enrollment or by invites, kind of setting where their manager or the instructor would enroll them at the course session level. Now, in the course session, not only we have learners, but we also have instructors. So we can see that if we switch the role, there are 3 instructors assigned to this particular course session. The idea is that if you have a sales onboarding or any kind of ILT based course, you might have some SMEs or some instructors who are skilled to take that particular class in the classroom or in the VILT format. So those instructors you should add here. And then you can have, like, events which will represent a specific scheduled class, whether it's ILT or VILT, doesn't matter, but specific dates of the class will be called event in EduBrite. So these are the classes you can see which are already set up. And to look inside any particular class, let's open. So each class is basically has a start date and end date, which basically represents class start and end time. It can have subscription start date and end date, which allows when the enrollment can begin and end for this particular class. And then you can have the capacity of the class, or it could be an unlimited class, depending on how you want to set up. You can set up some reminder setting, like say a day before or 2 days before the class. System would send the learners who are enrolled for this particular session a reminder that it's upcoming. You can have some additional description, and you can have a location for the class. These locations are basically managed as a group in EduBrite. So for example, you can manage the locations from here. Here we have a top level group called classrooms, and inside the classroom we have these 3 different subgroups which are individual classroom location. And you can create additional classroom location also if you are a site administrator, but these are like one time setup step. So you can just say I want to add a subgroup, and then you can select the conference room as a type of the group, and then just enter the group name and description. So that setting up the available classroom is more of a site level configuration, which each time instructor does not have to do for scheduling the class. It's already set up, and then you can just simply change the location or select a location from the available set of groups, like here. Then for the event options, you can enable things like waitlist and auto confirmation of waitlist, depending on whether your class has limited capacity or not. So if it has limited capacity, you can control after it has all the seats are full, whether you still allow some people to enroll themselves in the waitlisted status or not. So those are the settings we can control here from here. Now, one more component of these instructor-led sessions is that once the classroom session has been delivered, generally you want to send the learners a survey. Either it could be a survey which is like handed off as a sheet in the classroom, or it could be a survey link which you will send after the class to the learners, which they can take online in the LMS. So here we are showing that online survey option. So within the event, you can add additional survey or additional test also. Here we are just showing a survey has been added. Now for this particular survey itself, let's look at some of the typical surveys that you want to build for your class. So here I have just a 3-question survey, but the idea is to show you the kind of input or feedback you can receive from the learners. So it's a more of a yes no type question with the comment enabled, so the learners can also explain whether the class met their expectation or not. Then the next particular question is about the smile sheet, which Brian had mentioned in the presentation. So this is more of a Likert scale question where you can ask learners to rate their instructor. It could be about anything. This is just an example of asking to rate the instructor. So these are the different areas on which you are asking them to rate, like soft skills, subject understanding, and explanation. And the rating levels are defined here on the columns as 5 star to 1 star. And through the Likert scale point distribution, you can collect an overall score also for the later on aggregate analysis. So this basically controls 100% of the 5 point or 75% of whatever maybe the point for this particular question. Those will be aggregated, and you can collate them and analyze the overall performance of the instructor based on the feedback they receive from the learners. And another important question type for survey is essay. So like, just a open-ended feedback you can allow learners to provide about the particular class. So these are the three different question types which are quite relevant in a case of classroom survey. So that's the kind of survey we have used here. And let's go back to the events tab, and we can see one of the event is in progress, which is during this duration. And users can register, and you can go into this particular event and look at the participants who are registered. You can download this participant list. You can also download a sign-in sheet. So if you are conducting a classroom session, this sign-in sheet could be handy, where all you need to do is basically just print it out and collect the signature from the attendees. Now, we'll show some additional things about the classroom stuff from the blended activities perspective. So besides the event, we have set up assignments also in this particular sales onboarding course session. And these assignments will be related to the kind of training you are delivering in the class. So we are assuming this is about sales training. So there are two assignments for the learners to submit. One is about an elevator pitch, and second is about sales pitch. So these assignments you can create in the course session, and you can also advise the users about what they need to do. Like, you can say, record a 60-second elevator pitch and submit it here. And then you can allocate some points on these assignments. And then you can also establish a grading scheme for this particular course session, which does a justice of different activities involved in this particular course session. So let's look at the grading scheme. So we have created a custom grading scheme called blended session grading, which has 4 components in it. So quiz completion component, lesson read component, attendance, and assignment. Each one of these components have 25% weight. And what they are actually doing based on these rules is basically, if there are one or more tests available in the particular in this particular course, then it will find the average test score across all the test attempts, and that will be your score. But that score will only count as 25% of the overall 100% of the course total. And the lesson reading is about 25% again. So the 25% is allocated to any self-paced lessons like videos or documents that you need to read. So the 25% we are giving to that. Then 25% is for the attendance. So if you attend a particular classroom session or VILT session, and then the instructor can mark your attendance, that will count as 25%. And then the further 25% is for the assignment, the 2 assignments that we described. So this basically is an example, but depending on your situation, you may have just one or maybe different set of components in your grading scheme. So the point is that for any kind of ILT based session, always think about what will be the course completion criteria for your ILT training. And then based on that, a grading scheme needs to be created, a custom grading scheme. And we have a lot of examples pre-packaged, which you can find from the grading menu. Like if you go there, so there are some examples pre-configured. You can either copy them or create a new one from scratch based on the need. So besides grading scheme and assignment, there is one more aspect of the course session setup which may be applicable in some IIT scenario, and that is called subgroup or teams within the training itself. Like it could be a breakout group sessions or anything like that. So what we can do in EduBrite is you can create subgroup within a course session. And what it really means is, if there are 5 learners or 10 learners in this particular course registered, you can divide them into further subgroups. So we have here 2 teams, team A and team B, and you can divide them into these subgroups. And these subgroup members can have their own collaboration going on within these areas. Like they can have some forum activities or some resource sharing, discussion, etc. So that's the another optional component you might want to use. At the course session level itself, you can have a forum activated in which users can ask question and other users or instructors can reply. So this is more of a Q&A area. So this is pretty much it from the setup perspective. Now let's look at the experience from a learner's perspective of this session. So here I am logged in as a learner who is already enrolled in this particular course session. So if I, for example, launch this course session, this is the structure of the self-paced area. And you can see some of the other tabs also, like, there is an events tab in which I can enroll. So I have already enrolled in one of the event which is running right now. And on the overview tab, I can see the updates from this course session. And these updates are about activities performed inside the forum or other areas. Or I can also share just a general update with my other learners who are also taking this course. So this is pretty nice from a blended delivery perspective. If it is purely ILT, then you may not activate these features. You might just activate events tab and nothing at all, nothing more. So let's go to the launch tab here, and let me just go through this self-paced component first, and then we'll see the overall experience of the learner. So this is the first lesson. Then the pre-test. I can answer some of these questions just to indicate that users might not know everything before the session, and then they might learn everything as a result of your training. So I'm making answering some of these questions wrong deliberately. So I have scored 40% in this particular quiz, and then this is a video that I'm supposed to go through, and some of the subsequent components are logged. So unless I watch this video fully, I cannot go and take the post test, or I may not be able to join the event. So those things you can enforce when you set up. And one more thing is that we have enforced manual sign off on this particular lesson. So not only I need to go through this video fully, but I need to also acknowledge that I have completed it. So just an additional enforcement or acknowledgement we are getting from the learner's perspective. And then there are assignments. So these are the assignments. I can select a file and upload from here, or just pick one file from my computer. So I'm just picking a file here, and then just put a submission remark. One thing I forgot to mention is these assignments you will actually open only after the instructor-led session has completed. So, but from the learner's perspective, just assume that the session has been completed and learner is submitting the assignment right now. So the first assignment has been submitted, and this is the second one. So let me just get another document here. This time I'm going to upload a small video. So both the assignments are submitted. At any point of time, I can go and check my score. So as of now, I have only scored 25% out of 100. The reason being, I have received 25% because of just the completion of the lesson. Assignments, I have not received any score because they are not yet evaluated by the instructor. Likewise, I have not finished post test and my attendance has not been recorded. So I did not get those additional points yet. So now let's go from the instructor perspective and look at the assignment submissions, and we can grade the assignment. So these are the two assignments. You can see 2 submitted, 4 not submitted. You can go in each of these. So one of it has been already evaluated. The other one I can open and I can review the assignment response. This is the video which the learner has uploaded. I can go and view it or download it. So while viewing, I can I can provide feedback to the learner. So for example, if it is a sales training, you can have feedback about a specific time in the video. So that's the kind of functionality we are showing here. And each of these feedback will be recorded against a specific time in the video, which the learners can see. And then I can say, for example, add another comment at this point. Then I can go back to the assignment. And if I am not satisfied with this particular assignment's work, I can send this for rework also. So let me just add some evaluation remark and then send for rework. So this was one of the assignment which user submitted, but instructor has kind of again submitted it back. So that's what you'll see as a learner, that now you need to submit it again. So I can redo this and re-upload the file and then submit it again. And now as an instructor, I can clear it by accepting what the learner has submitted by grading it. So this is one cycle of assignment evaluation. Now we can go to the second one and just look at the two submitted assignment and just grade the other one also. So this one will just accept it. So this is the step. Now if we go and look at the user's transcript, we can see that now the score is 50 out of 100 because now the user has received the grades for the assignment completion also, which you can see from their grades detail also. So now 25% they got from lesson and 25 from the assignment. Now the next step I'm going to do as an instructor is I'm going to also record users attendance. So this is the participants tab, and then I can go and mark the attendance, or I can also send the survey or quiz link which was associated with this particular class to the learner so that they can also submit the survey. And note that the survey submission is independent of you recording their grades. So they may or may not submit the survey, or you might want to enforce that they have to submit the survey before you can grade them. So up to you to decide. And that is completely determined by start and end date of the survey activity in this particular event. So when you are setting up the survey, you can set when the survey can begin and when it will end. So during this interval, learners have to finish the survey also. But your decision will be completely on the instructor about whether they want to record the attendance before they have received the survey responses or not. So here I'm going to just add the attendance. So this is the person who attended the class, so I'm going to just mark him as attended. And because we have a custom grading scheme with attendance as one criteria, so you will always see this additional option to grade this also. And then just save the attendance, go back to the learner's record here. So now you can see that because the attendance record has also been submitted, so the score now stands at 75%, with attendance being the third component of the grade. Now the last component which the learner has to do is take the post test, or in fact they need to also complete a survey. So let's first take the survey. So on the home page, if you go to the particular event, or if you go to the exams and survey tab on your dashboard as a learner, you will see the survey that you are supposed to take, and you can start the survey right from here. So this is the survey that we had attached to this particular event, and learner can write some comment here. This is the Likert question where user can rate the instructor on any of these star levels, and additionally they can also enter some comment. And the last one is about open feedback. And all these survey responses will be available for you to get the aggregate reporting. So this is all the user has to do about the survey. Now the last thing which they need to finish to get the course completion status is to pass the post test. So we are going to just go through the post test quickly. Now everything is done. So the learner has completed both the online self-paced stuff as well as the ILT stuff. So they can be marked as completed. And you can see the overall score now stands at 100% because all the activities are completed and they can download their certificate of completion. So this was an example of fully self-paced as well as ILT combination, which we call as blended delivery. But you may have just a need for ILT or any other combination, so you can configure the system or the course accordingly. Now, a couple of other things that we talked about, I did not go in detail, was in the forum. So learners can, of course, open a new topic for discussion or reply to the other learners' topics of discussion. So that's always possible in the forum. Now, once the training has been completed, generally we see that the retention of the knowledge they learned in the training will diminish over a period, as Brian also mentioned in the presentation. So a very important remedy could be to enable other self-paced courses or the self-paced content to remain open for access forever. So that's one option, that you can allow learners to have access to these content forever, which can be determined by the duration of their course session. So if the duration of the course session is such that the end date is far in future, so they will always have access to the launch tab of this course session, regardless of whether they have finished the course or not, and they can go through these content anytime. The second remedy is micro-learning, which EduBrite supports, and we call it as open learning. So some of these lessons you can make available in the micro-learning or open learning area, which the learners can come and browse and access anytime, regardless of whether that lesson is still available in the course they are registered in, or whether the course access has expired. Open learning area will always allow them access to these micro learning content. This is one of the video which was there in the course, and now learner can access this video right from the open learning area as a standalone resource without going through the course player or the launch experience of the course player. So this is an important element in the retention side of the learning. Micro learning can be very useful in reinforcing any kind of learning concept that you learn during any kind of in any style of training, whether self-paced or ILT. If you want to make these resources available, open learning is one feature that EduBrite supports. And how you decide what is available in open learning and what is not. So let me just show you the course structure also. So at the course level, you can say whether your course is previewable or not. So to make it available in open learning, you need to make it previewable. You can make it previewable by all users or by certain group members. And at the lesson level, also you can decide whether a particular lesson is previewable or not. Then only that will show up in the open learning area, because there may be some items which are not suitable for micro learning, they are pretty large content, so those might not be good candidate for micro learning. Generally for micro learning you need to have 2 to 3 minute or 2 to 5 minute videos at the most, or maybe some documents which users can refer to anytime. So those ones you can make it previewable and they will start showing up in the open learning, otherwise they won't. So yeah, so this is kind of a quick review of how the ILT and VILT sessions are set up. Yeah, just one more thing I missed is the multi-day class. So let me show that experience as well, how to set up the multi-day class. Within the course session, you are creating events, and these events you can have for one day or you can have it for multiple dates. So essentially, if it is a multi-day class, then all you need to do is set up everything the way you did, and then for each date you can add an offline item, just like we added a survey before. Here you can add offline item for individual dates. So these dates will be basically the will represent the multiple dates on which this particular session has to be attended, and then this whole thing can repeat. So for example, you may have this multi-day class example which is for 3 dates. So if a user registers for this particular class, they have to attend on all 3 days, or they have access to this particular class for all 3 days. And then you can repeat this event for another set of dates. So like a easy way is to just simply copy it and select another date on which you want to run this class. Like say for example, I can select June 17th here and copy. So now from June 17th, it has created another event which has all the 3 days configured. And this thing you can just keep on copying for further recurrence of this particular class. So that's the one of the other features that you can manage in the EduBrite. So Brian, I am pretty much done with my demo. Let's go to the conclusion slide. All right. So from the conclusion, I mean, based on the demonstration and the discussion we had, we can make few points. Like, in some cases, ILT might be the only practical modality depending on the kind of training, especially in the manufacturing industry or in some, even some in some software industries. There are cases where you need to have the instructor present in the classroom. There's no other way. Then uh, building the ILT is completely an art. How you build it is up to you. Always keep in mind what the learners are going to get from your training and how they will retain it, not just during the training, but like maybe months and years after the training. So make it more effective by adding some refresher content or some micro learning content or self-paced content which they can always reference back. Always try to measure the effectiveness of your training through these post test, and then try to compare it with the pre-test result just to get the effectiveness of the training, and also collect the users feedback through the survey of that particular class. So yes, I think that's pretty much it. So we are basically in this mode of conducting these series of webinars. So stay connected. A good way to stay connected is to become a member on our EduBrite user community, which is university.edubrite.com. And also you can follow us on Twitter at EduBrite is our handle. And you can also follow our updates on our blog.edubrite.com. So we'll be posting future webinar announcements there, and also recordings of all the webinars that we are conducting will be posted on university.edubrite.com. Brian, maybe if you can just open the university page in browser. Right. So this is EduBrite University page, and you can see all the video recordings in the open learning area, and the new announcements or the upcoming webinars will be available in the events section of this website. So feel free to check all the upcoming webinars and join them. Share the links with your colleagues who may be interested in joining these sessions. And if you have any suggestion for us to cover in the next webinars, feel free to either post your suggestions in the community or write back to us at support@edubrite.com. All right, with this, I think thanks everyone again for joining, and we look forward to see you in the next sessions.